The Rocky Mountain Trench, also known as the Valley of 1,000 Peaks or simply the Trench, is a large valley in the northern part of the Rocky Mountains. It is both visually and cartographically a striking physiographic feature extending approximately 1,600 kilometers from Flathead Lake, Montana, to the Flathead River, just south of the British Columbia-Yukon border near What's-It Lake, Yukon. The trench bottom is 3 to -16 kilometers wide and ranges from 600 to 900 meters above sea level. The general orientation of the trench is an almost uniform 150-330th degree geographic north vector, which has also become convenient for north-south aviators. Although some of its topography has been carved into glacial valleys, it is primarily a byproduct of faulting. The trench separates the Rocky Mountains on its east from the Columbia Mountains and the Cassia Mountains on its west. It also skirts part of the McGregor Plateau area of the Nichako Plateau sub-area of the interior plateau of British Columbia. It is up to 25 kilometers wide, if measured peak to peak, and varies in valley relief, but is clearly visible from the air. Satellite remote sensing and is commonly discernible to those ascending any of the mountains or ridges lining it. It is drained by 4 major river basins, the Columbia, Fraser, Peace and Lion. 2 reservoirs of the Columbia River treaty fill much of its length today, Lake Koocanusa and Lake Kinbasket. A further British Columbia Power Initiative created Lake Williston. Rivers that follow the trench, at least in part, are the Kootenay River, the Columbia River, Canoe River, the Flathead River, Fraser River, Parsnip River, Finley River, Fox River, and the Ketchikan River. The North Fork of the Flathead River, flowing into Flathead Lake with the other branches of the Flathead River, is part of the Columbia River system. The Ketchikan is part of the Liard River system, and the Fox, Parsnip and Finley Rivers and part of the Peace River system. The Canoe River is a short tributary of the Columbia system, draining into Kinbasket Lake, a reservoir on the Columbia River. The Kootenay River, however, does not fully follow the trench but exits Canada southwest via Lake Koocanusa Reservoir to the Libby Dam. The Kootenay River is a tributary of the Columbia, joining the Columbia at Castlegower, BC after a meander through the USA as the Kootenay River. For convenience, the Rocky Mountain Trench may be divided into 2 sections, being the Northern Rocky Mountain Trench and Southern Rocky Mountain Trench. The dividing point reflects the separation of north and easterly flows to the Arctic Ocean versus south and westerly flows to the Pacific Ocean. A break in the valley system at ~54 degrees north near Prince George, British Columbia may be used for this purpose. The northern portion of the trench is dominated by strike-slip faulting, while the southern part of the trench was created by normal faults. Despite differences in timing and faulting styles of the northern and southern portions, they were aligned with each other because faulting for both was controlled by a pre-existing, west-facing, deep basement ramp with over 10 kilometers of vertical offset. Northern Rocky Mountain Trench. The Northern Rocky Mountain Trench is closely aligned with the Tintina Trench near the British Columbia-Yukon border at 60 degrees north latitude, and the 2 trenches could arguably be classified as one and the same, or extensions of each other. The Tintina Trench extends further northwestward through the Yukon into Alaska. The visible expression of the 2 trenches is lost where they plunge under the boreal forests of the Liard Plain proximate to the small communities of What's-It Lake, Yukon and Lower Post, BC. The highest point in the northern trench is Siphon Pass at an elevation of about 1,010 meters near the bend of Scarcity Creek. Geology. Right lateral strike-slip movement of the Tintina Fault on the Tintina Northern Rocky Mountain Trench may have begun during the Middle Jurassic. The fastest rates of slip probably occur during two pulses in the Middle Cretaceous and Early Cenozoic, respectively, with the latter probably occurring during the Eocene, between 750 km to NGT 900 km of total right lateral movement has occurred, of which 450 km of offset has occurred since the mid-Cretaceous. The end result is that terrains to the west of the fault system have moved toward the north. In the context of plate tectonics, strike-slip movement of the Tintina Fault on the Tintina Northern Rocky Mountain Trench is also related to strike-slip movement along the San Andreas Fault, the extension of the Basin and Range Province, and other extensional strike-slip fault systems in western North America. The Tintina Fault is one of the two major fault zones paralleling the northern Cordilleran volcanic province, the other being the Denali Fault in the Yukon, the U.S. state of Alaska, and along the British Columbia coast. History and accessibility. First Nations have traditionally always traveled the Northern Trench. There are several epic post-European contact travels up the Northern Trench, often of legendary proportion, but the trench here remains mostly wild, and the northern 300 kilometers is essentially unroaded despite a few cut trails for fire outfitters or logging. This wildland is a credit to several turns of fate and arguably strategic administrative decisions since 1824. The most natural of all land transportation corridors in northern British Columbia has been left in a wild state. On many government maps produced since 1897, indications of a possible trail have been published. However, with changes in beaver dams, forest fires, despite maintenance by guide outfitters, the trail from Fox Lake north is often hard to find, or obliterated to all but indigenous and experienced Casca natives. The Northern Trench is, however, an undisputed aviation route today. The Northern Trench from the Highway 97 bridge on the Parsnip River has routes on both sides of Williston Reservoir to Fort Ware. The route up the east side cannot be followed due to the Peace Reach of the reservoir. The road traveler will use the gravel road up the west side of the reservoir to Ware. Beyond the point, the northbound traveler will only find a narrow cat road for a few kilometers. The Cascadena culture of Fort Ware and Lower Post refer to their ancestral use of the 300 kilometers natural route as the Trail of the Ancient Ones. They also call it the Devi Trail, honoring David Braconnier, the founding chief of the community at Ware. 1797 John Finley records the forks of the Finley and Parsnip Rivers and ventures part way up each river. The Finley River later comes to bear his name. 1823 to 1825 Samuel Black was sent by the HBC north through Finley Forks to the Fox River and returned later that season. He narrowly missed being the first white person to go all the way up the Northern Trench to the Liard River, but chose not to listen to his guide, heading northwestward seeking the source of the Finley River instead. He travels far enough NW to discover the headwaters of another trench tributary, the Turn Again River. Natives that find a marker left by Black and report it to historic Fort Halkett on the Liard River. 1831 John MacLeod of the HBC records the mouth of the Ketchikan River emptying out of the northern end of the trench into the Liard near the BC-Yukon border. 1872 Captain William F. Butler ascends part of the Finley River and records both the Fox River and Fox Lake to the north. 1897 to 1898 The Canadian government sends a police patrol under Inspector Moody to map a possible supply route from the Peace River to the Yukon, specifically Dawson City. The patrol, assumed to have perished, eventually arrived at Fort Selkirk. They proved the viability of the route and produced a surviving map of it. 1898 McGregor's book The Klondike Rush, though Edmonton summarizes various sources saying up to 45 parties were reported along the route from Fox River to Sylvester's Landing. There was also a reported drive of cattle on this route. 1906 A Northwest Mounted Police patrol under field supervision of Inspector Constantine began the construction of the police trail westward from Hudson Hope and then northward up the Northern Trench from HBC's post at Fort Graham. 1907 British Columbia Premier R. McBride intervened and asked Canada to direct the police resources to connect with the more westerly Telegraph Trail route. Under protest, the NWMP field team did so. The trail was soon abandoned due to its non-viable character. The political route departure from Fort Graham westward added 400 rugged snowy kilometers to the total distance without going any favorable ground, or measurable distance closer to the north. The Devi Trail is noted to be excellent for wintering horse due to low snow accumulations. 1912 British Columbia magazine Prospector reports Sifton Pass as the most eventual and most practicable for a railway formed the Fraser River to the Yukon. 1914 Premier McBride advocates a railway on INSP. Moody's route according to B. Kennelly in a pamphlet, The British Columbia Peace. Fort St. John, 1936. 1926 Whitewater Post is established by HBC. Whitewater is the translation of Quadacha, a nearby river. 1930 to 1931 British Columbia Department of Public Works investigates a road route over Sifton Pass. 1934 Charles Beddoe, a noted international workplace management consultant, leads and finances the Beddoe Expedition, formerly known as the Beddoe Canadian Subarctic Expedition. While his advance scouts arrive at McDame Post near Good Hope Lake, the leader and entourage abandon the mission at Driftpile Creek due to fatigue, lack of horse feed, and impending winter. The controversial adventure is the subject of a 1995 Beddoe film biography titled Champagne Safari. 1942 February a final decision was reached regarding the A, B, and C routes for a northern highway. It will connect the Northwest Staging Route airfields and bypass the Northern Trench for the joint Canada-Alaska Highway Alcan Highway, alternately Alaska Highway. The three routes had been the subject of considerable economic competition between governments and communities since the Klondike Gold Rush. The A route was a stick-in option similar to Highway 37 of today. The B route favors the trench option. The C route following the airfields east of the Rocky Mountains and then crossing to the west near the Liard River is the chosen route. 1942 March 28 the American government initiates a highly secret survey. It was undertaken for the purpose of assessing a military railway link up the northern Rocky Mountain Trench. It was completed on September 28. November 15 U.S. General Somerville declines to proceed with a military railway. Canada's Major Charles presents drawings for the Northern Trench portion of a railway from where to Lower Post of 218.5 miles, $112 million cost, with 17,000 personnel over 400 days. Of the 17 total miles of proposed railway to Alaska, 530 are on Canadian soil and lie within the northern Rocky Mountain Trench of the Tintina Trench. 1949 U.S. Congress Public Law 391 authorizes a location survey for a railway from Prince George to Fairbanks. Prince George Board of Trade advocates the trench route, the B route. 1950 October P. Canadian Transport Minister Lionel Chevrier advocates the 1942 route in a secret document to federal cabinet. A budget of $750 million is presented. 1953 Whitewater post-aqueducture of the HBC closes. Today the Cascadena community of Fort Ware remains as a full-time settlement. 1957 Swedish industrial savant Axel Wennergren advocates resource megadevelopments for the Peace River area. Among his proposals he envisions a monorail up the Northern Trench. Some area proposals came to partial fruition but the monorail did not. 1960 to 1967 the government of BC declined the Northern Trench as the strategic railway choice, favoring instead a route to the west similar to the Telegraph route. Part of the reason is that the lower Finley and Parsnip River portions of the Northern Trench would be flooded by the damming of the Peace River. Reservoir land acquisition commences. The selected westerly rail route, the Dease Lake extension along the A route, has been, in part, abandoned, and in lesser part been reopened to tackle siding for logging use. 1964 U.S. Congress tables the NAWAPA proposal by Parsons Engineering Group would see flooding of the portions of the trench as part of a continental-scale water diversion. 1971 Sir Ranulph Fiennes descends the trench from Ketchikan mouth mostly on foot, partly solo as part of his circumpolar expedition. For this and other feats he is later recorded by Guinness Book of Records as the world's greatest living explorer. 1981 Skook Davidson, longtime outfitter, proposes a federal national park in the Northern Trench. 1998 After several years of round-table discussions, the British Columbia government takes first legislative steps to establish a provincial Muskwa-Ketchikan management area. It covers an area considerably larger than the floor of the trench and its immediate tributaries. 1999 Carsten Hewer completes the final section of the Y2Y hike at Lower Post 2000 extension of the Muskwa-Ketchikan management area into the Northern Trench. Much of the northern Rocky Mountain Trench's furthest reaches within this British Columbia protected area. Significant exposure is given to the MKMA in the November 2008 National Geographic magazine as a follow-up to their partial funding of a recent expedition to Gataga Pass. In 2009 context, the Northern Trench could have, and might yet, become the preferred route for the 120-year-old concept of a Canada-Alaska railway concept. Discussions among feasibility experts still do not seem to favor the B route, despite it being lower, more direct, fewer major river crossings and considerably less snow. Southern Rocky Mountain Trench. Geology. The Southern Rocky Mountain Trench was created mainly by Cenozoic age extension. What little strike-slip movement that is found in the Southern Trench is not considered significant. The extensional faulting was nonetheless substantial, having extended as deep as 13.5 kilometers. The Southern Trench also differs from the Northern Trench in that it is more sinuous and is asymmetrical in cross-section. The western side of the Southern Rocky Mountain Trench is more subdued and are irregular than the east side. During late Paleozoic to Mesozoic time, rapid sediment deposition and subsidence to the west transitioned in the area of the modern Rocky Mountain Trench into a stable continental shelf. In the east, the Nevadan orogeny destroyed the western wedge of sedimentary rocks during Jurassic to Middle Cretaceous time, thrusting them up into metamorphic fold belts. Currently, strata on either side of the Southern Rocky Mountain Trench consist mainly of Precambrian and Paleozoic metasedimentary and sedimentary rocks. Within the trench are unconsolidated Cenozoic sandstones and conglomerates. The aforementioned aforementioned basement ramp along which orogeny-related thrust faulting and subsequent strike slip and normal faulting occurred is probably associated with the ancient continental shelf of Paleozoic and Mesozoic time. Geography. The southern Rocky Mountain Trench comprises approximately one-half of the trench in British Columbia and includes three regions: the Robson Valley, Columbia Valley and East Kootenay. It hosts communities at McBride, Dunster, Tatjana, Valemount, Canoe, Donald, Golden, Spilmachine, Briscoe, Edgewater, Radium, Athalma, Invermere, Windermere, Fairmont, Canal Flats, Skookumchuck, Owasso, Fort Steele, Wardner, Jaffrey, Elko and Grassmere. It hosts two major reservoirs, Kinbasket Lake and Lake Kookaniusa. There are intersections with two other trench features. At the approximate midpoint of Kinbasket Lake, the now submerged Columbia River exits the trench in an almost southerly direction toward Revelstoke and flows beyond to its point of exit from Canada south of Trail, BC, west of Donald, BC. The Beaver River flows in from the south, but it represents the intersection of the lesser but impressive feature called the Purcell Trench. The Purcell Trench, as it proceeds southward, becomes the valley of the Duncan River and Duncan and Kootenay Lakes. There are four geographic segments of the southern Rocky Mountain Trench. The segment of the trench encompassing the uppermost court of the Fraser River from east of Prince George and continuing southeastward to the town of Valemount is known as the Robson Valley, named after Mount Robson, which overlooks its southern end. Valemount is the westerly portal to the Yellowhead Pass. From Valemount and Canoe southeastward to the eastern egress of Rogers Pass at Donald, BC, just north of the town of Golden. The trench cradles the waters of Kinbasket Lake, the reservoir created by Mica Dam. This region before the reservoir was part of the route of the Interprovincial Highway, once known as the Big Bend Highway, prior to the 1960s opening of the Rogers Pass section of the Trans-Canada. The trench from Golden extending shade to the headwaters of the Columbia River at Columbia Lake is known as the Columbia Valley. Golden is the westerly portal to the Kicking Horse Pass on Highway No. 1 eastbound to Alberta. The southernmost Canadian part of the trench is the core of a region known as the East Kootenay, comprising the upper of the two Canadian portions of the valley of the Kootenay River. Here, near Cranbrook, British Columbia, the trench is much wider than to the northwest, forming more of a broad basin than the U-shaped valley which typifies most of the trench elsewhere from Columbia Lake northwards to the Liard. This segment bifurcates near Wasso, 100 kilometers north of the U.S. border. The offshooting western fork contains the city of Cranbrook, affords access to the nearby city of Kimberley. Elko is the westerly portal to the Crow's Nest Pass on Highway 3 eastbound to Alberta. The southward transborder extension of the trench into Montana is the primary containment for Lake Kookaniusa, a Kootenay River reservoir created by the Libby Dam near Libby, Montana. Culture and economy. The large valley and tributaries have always offered an economy based on ranching and logging. This has been supplemented by fortuitous locations of several mines, often inside valleys and producing lead, zinc, coal and gypsum. The Canadian Pacific Railway also constructed a spur line which extends northward up the southern trench between Cranbrook and Golden. This serves to interconnect the southerly rail route of the Crow's Nest Pass to the CPR main line through Rogers Pass. Today it carries Crow's Nest coal to Sauvaton for export. A southerly rail link through Yark enables freight shipments into Idaho and the western U.S. Tourism has become an active force in the economy. The Southern Trench is also known for a number of ski resorts in the trench or in the nearby tributary valleys. These destinations include Fairmont, Panorama, Kimberley, Purdon, Kicking Horse and the original Bugaboo Heli Ski Lodge. Numerous other ski touring and backcountry lodges are also found here. The summer sports of golf, boating, fishing, and hiking round out the appeal to a growing weekend and permanent recreational population. Hunting, fishing, off-roading, and camping will continue to be attractive pastimes. These include guided activities and individual pursuit of the area. The generous mix of low elevation, good climate, fine scenery, diverse recreation and resort accommodation has fostered a vacation-based real estate industry for communities and rural areas surrounding Cranbrook, Windermere, Invermere, Radium, and Golden. There are many other local unincorporated communities and post offices, settlements and localities. The Trench hosts only a few present-day communities. From north to south they are Lower Post, British Columbia, Fort Ware, Ingenico Point, Messy-Linka, Fort Graham, Mackenzie, British Columbia, Holmes River, British Columbia, McBride, British Columbia, Tejornagash, British Columbia, Valemount, British Columbia, Boat Encampment, Golden, British Columbia, Radium Hot Springs, British Columbia, Invermere, British Columbia, Fairmont Hot Springs, British Columbia, Kimberley, British Columbia, Cranbrook, British Columbia, Eureka, Montana, Whitefish, Montana, Kalispell, Montana,